One's taking the lead, followed closely by Hot Wheels Skid 01, and in third place, we have 10 Cayman 704. It's a tight competition right from the start, folks. Let's see who will come out on top. Amaljet is making a rapid charge, overtaking 13 cars to secure the lead. Meanwhile, Gary_710 is also on the move, passing 13 cars to take second place. F3RNY is not to be outdone, overtaking an impressive 15 cars to grab third position. Hot Wheels Skid 01 is taking the lead, followed by Lucas Bulldog 7 and Luke Runs. These racers are off to a roaring start. Super Lacroix impressively overtakes 4 cars, now in 34th place. Luke Runs takes second place from Lucas Bulldog 7, while VD39 climbs to 5th, passing 10 Cayman 704. Hey everyone, looks like things are heating up. Let's see how this plays out. Unipaki and Surianbot are on a roll, overtaking 5 cars to secure the 24th position. Blurtron is making a strong move, closing in on Susanne Greenberg, reducing the gap by 5.8 seconds. Meanwhile, Lucas Bulldog 7 and Nukenbakum are locked in a tight battle for third place, showcasing the capabilities of their respective cars. Hot Wheels Skid 01 is in the lead, followed by Luke Runs and Lucas Bulldog 7. It's anyone's game as they navigate the track. Smurf 20 and Meyer have fallen back to 29p. Celerasamu is now in 7p after overtaking Twix 560, while Bucksize Row is closing in on Twix 560, reducing the gap by 2.4 seconds. VD39 successfully overtakes Nukenbakum for 4th place. Meanwhile, Celerasamu secures the 6th position after passing 10 Cayman 704. Ten Cayman 704 has dropped to the 15th position. VD39 is gaining on Lucas Bulldog 7, reducing the gap by 2.3. VD39 and Nukenbakum are fiercely contesting the 4th spot with a Radical SR319 and a Lancia LC2 respectively. Okyoki 3 has made an impressive move, jumping for places to 22p. Noga 77 is also making a swift climb, overtaking 4 cars to secure 23p. On the flip side, Gary 710 seems to be encountering difficulties, slipping back 9 spots to 28p. Nukenbakum is making gains on Lucas Bulldog 7, reducing the gap by 5.5. Electric Mary is swiftly closing in on F3RNY, narrowing the gap by 7.2. RR Raphael is encountering issues and has dropped 7 positions to 27p. Twix 560 is making a strong move, closing in on VD39 by 5.3. Celerasamu is struggling, dropping back 10 places to 17p. Nukenbakum has surged to 3p, passing Lucas Bulldog 7. It's an intense start to the race as Luke takes the lead, trailed closely by Hot Wheels Kid 01 and Nukenbakum. Let's see if they can maintain their positions as the race progresses. Blurtron is rapidly closing in on Hot 03, reducing the gap by 47.0. Meanwhile, Duff Dad is facing difficulties, slipping 9 positions to 31p. Nukenbakum has made a move to 2p, overtaking Hot Wheels Skid 01. Susanne Greenberg is rapidly gaining on Gary_710, reducing the gap by 5.9. Newcombotham is closing in on Luke_runs, narrowing the gap by 2.1. Meanwhile, Bucksizero has surged to 6p, successfully overtaking Coca by 90 and Amy. Susanne Greenberg is making a strong move, cutting the gap to Gary_710 by 112.1. Meanwhile, Hot Wheels Skid 01 has surged to 2p, overtaking Newcombotham. The battle for 2p between Hot Wheels Skid 01 in a Cadillac ATS-V.R and Newcombotham in a Lancia LC2 is heating up. Twix 560 from Team Bolt Bucket Motorsports continues to gain on Lucas Bulldog 7, reducing the gap by 5.6. Newcombotham has advanced to 2p, overtaking Hot Wheels Skid 01. Now Twix 560 from Team Bolt Bucket Motorsports is closing in on Lucas Bulldog 7, cutting the gap by 5.6. MD162 is closing in on VD39, reducing the gap by 5.2. Hot Wheels Skid 01 has overtaken Newcombotham and is now in second place. Bucksizero is narrowing the gap to Twix 560 by 4.2. Lucas Bulldog 7 has advanced to 3p, passing Newcombotham. Newcombotham and Twix 560 are battling for 4p. Newcombotham is in a Lancia LC2, and Twix 560 is in AURDC 81. Unipaki and Surianbot have progressed to 6p, overtaking Bucksizero. Hot Wheels Skid 01 is on the move, narrowing the gap to Luke runs by 5.4. Amaljet is also making gains, reducing the distance to MD162 by 5.7. Hot Wheels Skid 01 continues to push, closing in on Luke runs by 5.4. Blurtron is making a swift move, narrowing the gap to Duff Dad by 20.4 units. Gary_710 is also on the move, closing in on LV1NNY by 549.1 units. Hot Wheels Skid 01 is gaining ground, reducing the gap to Luke runs by 2.7 units. Lucas Bulldog 7 is rapidly catching up to Hot Wheels Skid 01, closing the gap by 5.8. Blakefish 88 is swiftly gaining on Amaljet, closing the gap by 5.7. MYST149 is making significant progress, closing the gap by 44.5 on RR Raphael. Lucas Bulldog 7 is closing in on Hot Wheels Skid 01, reducing the gap by 6.7. Arya Serial is quickly catching up to Amaljet, closing the gap by 6.9. Todd Gardner is reeling in Okioki 3 from Team COD, closing the gap by 8.0. Super Lacroix continues to make an impressive push, closing the gap on Hugged 03 by 12.1. Unipaki and Surianbot have surged into 5p, overtaking Newcombotham. Newcombotham has moved up to 6p, overtaking Bucksizero. Unipaki and Surianbot have advanced to 4p, surpassing Twix 560. Newcombotham and Bucksizero are dueling for 6p, with Newcombotham in a Lancia LC2 and Bucksizero in a Nissan R380 Hugged 03 has climbed to 22p, overtaking Super Lacroix. Blurtron is making a strong move, closing in on Celerissemble by 39.8. Duff Dad is facing some challenges, dropping 6 positions to 32p. Meanwhile, Bucksizero has jumped to 5p, overtaking Twix 560. Lucas Bulldogs 7 is steadily closing in on Hot Wheels Skid 01, reducing the gap by 2.7. Meanwhile, Kokubai 90 and Amy have both jumped to 6p, overtaking Twix 560. There's a heated battle for 6p between Kokubai 90 and Amy in a Radical SR 319 and Twix 560 in a URDC 81. Blakefish 88 is on the move, closing in on MD 162 by 5.9. Zagoat 22 is gaining ground on Todd R. Gardner, closing the gap by 7.2. Super Lacroix is closing in on Hugged 03, reducing the gap by 5.3. Twix 560 is now just 3.3 seconds behind Bucksize Row. Blakefish 88 is closing in on MD 162, reducing the gap to 2.5 seconds. Duff Dad has made a move up to 30p, overtaking MYST 149. Bucksize Row from Team Quark Express is closing in on Unipaki and Sir Ironbot, reducing the gap by 2.9 units. New Kembakken is narrowing the distance to Twix 560 by 3.6 units. MD 162 has made a swift move up to 9p, overtaking VD 39. Hugged 03 is rapidly closing in on Asgn 7, reducing the gap by 6.6 seconds. Celerisemu is swiftly reeling in Super Lacroix, closing the gap by 6.5 seconds. Gary 710 from Team No Name Racing is steadily reeling in Blotron, closing the gap by 8.4 seconds. It's a race of inches as Hugged 03 closes the gap on Asgn 7 by 5.1. Celerisemu is giving Super Lacroix a run for their money, closing the gap by 7.1. Lucas Bulldogs 7 is hot on the heels of Hot Wheels Skid 01, closing the gap by 4.0. New Kembakken is making a strong push, reducing the gap to Unipaki and Sir Ironbot by 6.6 seconds. Additionally, MD 162 has surged to 8th place, overtaking Kokubai 90 and Amy. LV1NNY is making an impressive charge, closing the gap to 10K 70 for by 39.2. Meanwhile, New Kembakken from Team Death Robots has surged to 4p, overtaking Unipaki and Sir Ironbot. The battle for 4p between New Kembakken in a Lancia LC2 and Unipaki and Sir Ironbot in an Aston Martin Vantage GT is intensifying. Twix 560 has significantly closed in on Bucksize Row, reducing the gap by 6.4. Additionally, Blakefish 88 has advanced to 10th place, surpassing Jump 073. F3RNY is making a swift move, closing in on Arya Serial by 6.2. Okyoki 3 is also on the move, narrowing the gap to Noga 77 by 8.4. LV1NNY is not far behind, reducing the distance to 10K 70 for by 5.1. Twix 560 is making gains on Bucksize Row, reducing the gap by 4.0. Meanwhile, Blakefish 88 and Jump 073 are fiercely contending for 10p, with the Malta closing in on Jump 073, narrowing the gap by 3.5. Noted, as Hot Wheels Skid 01 closes in on Luke Runs by 9.6, RR Raphael is also reducing the gap to Super Lacroix by 7.0. Meanwhile, Celerisemu is making significant progress, closing in on RR Raphael by 12.8. New Kembakken is closing in on Hot Wheels Skid 01, reducing the gap by 6.0. Super Lacroix is rapidly catching up to Hoped 03 from Team Navgum Kings, closing the gap by 6.9. Lucas Bulldogs 7 has made a move up to 2p, overtaking Hot Wheel Skid 01. Bucksize Row is closing in on Unipaki and Sir Iron Bot, reducing the gap by 5.8 seconds. R.A. Raphael is narrowing the distance to Blutron, closing the gap by 13.9 seconds. Hot Wheel Skid 01 has advanced to 2p, overtaking Newcambochum. Susanne Greenberg has made a swift move, narrowing the gap to R.A. Raphael by 45.9. But LV1NNY is not far behind, closing in on Susanne Greenberg by 14.0. And Dove Dad is also in the mix, closing in on LV1NNY by 5.9. MYST149 is making significant gains on LV1NNY, reducing the gap by 43.4 units. Newcambochum is closing in on Luke Runs, narrowing the gap by 2.8. MD162 has advanced to 7p, surpassing both Koki by 90 and Amy. Newcambochum from Team Death Robots is making impressive progress, reducing the gap to Luke Runs by 8.8. Similarly, MD162 is also surging ahead, closing the distance to Twix 560 from Team Bolt Bucket Motorsports by 10.6. Exciting developments on the track. R.A. Raphael is closing in on Blutron, reducing the gap by 6.5. LV1NNY is making gains on 10 Caymanin 704, closing the gap by 14.0. Newcambochum is narrowing the distance to Luke Runs by 2.4. Celerisamu is making a strong push, narrowing the gap to Super Lacroix by 9.3. John 073 has climbed to 8p, passing Koki by 90 and Amy. It's a tight battle for 8p between John 073, Koki by 90, and Amy. Super Lacroix is now just 456.0 units behind Lucas Bulldogs 7. Hot Wheel Skid 01 has cut the gap to Newcambochum by 3.1 units. Arya Serial has made a move up to 10p after overtaking Amaljet. Hot Wheel Skid 01 is making gains on Newcambochum, reducing the gap by 2.4. Twix 560 and Bucksize Row are in a tight battle for 5p, with Twix 560 in a URDC 81 and Bucksize Row in a Nissan R380 2. Meanwhile, Arya Serial, Koki by 90, and Amy are locked in a battle for 9p, with Arya Serial driving a Ferrari 365 GTB / for Daytona, and Koki by 90 and Amy both in a Radical SR319. John 073 is making a swift move, narrowing the gap to MD162 by 7.8. Unipaki and Sir Iron Bot are catching up to Hot Wheel Skid 01, closing the gap by 5.0. Bucksize Row has advanced to 5p, overtaking Twix 560. John 073 is making a swift move, closing the gap on MD162 by 5.7 units. Similarly, VD39 is also closing in on Todd R. Gardner, reducing the gap by 6.4 units. Exciting developments on the track. Hot Wheel Skid 01 from Team Wine and Midnight Runners has drastically reduced the gap to Newcambochum by 22.7. LV1NNY is also making significant progress, closing in on Lucas Bulldog's 7 by 328.2. Exciting developments unfolding as we witness some intense battles on the track. Bucksizero is under pressure from Twix 560, who's reducing the gap by 7.8 seconds. Hot Wheels Skid 01 has advanced to second place, overtaking Newcambocken from Team Death Robots. Twix 560 is still closing in on Bucksizero, narrowing the gap by 7.8 seconds. Hot Wheels Skid 01 from Team Wang and Midnight Runners is on fire, reducing the gap to Luke Runs by 9.6. There's a fierce battle for the 12th position between F3RNY in Espana GTA Spano and Amaljit in AB Engineering Adonis. Newcambocken is closing in on Hot Wheels Skid 01 by 5.3. MD162 is reeling in Bucksizero, closing the gap by 13.4. Koki by 90 and Amy are quickly reeling in Aria Serial, closing the gap by 6.2. Hot Wheels Skid 01 is closing in on Luke Runs, reducing the gap by 3.2. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are also catching up to Newcambocken, closing the gap by 4.0. And Blakefish 88 is reeling in John 073, reducing the gap by 3.5. MYST149 is making a swift move, closing in on LV1NNY by 551.0 units. Twix 560 is closing in on Unipaki and Sir Ironbot by 2.5 units. Arya Serial has made a move up to 9p, overtaking Blakefish 88. Newcambocken is now just 6.6 seconds behind Hot Wheels Skid 01. Gary 710 is closing in on Eugene 7, narrowing the gap by 572.2. MYST149 is closing in on LV1NNY, reducing the gap by 43.8. John B073 is making significant progress, cutting the gap to MD162 by 6.8. Celery Samuel is steadily closing in on Super Lacroix, narrowing the gap by 8.9. Hot Wheels Kid 01 is gaining ground on Luke Runs, reducing the gap by 2.3. Twix 560 said, "Hey Amy, who has the fastest lap?" Hot Wheels Skid 01 driving the Cadillac ATS-V.R with the fastest lap of 0:14.646. Speedy. Newcambocken is making gains on Hot Wheels Skid 01, reducing the gap by 3.9. Bucksizero is closing in on Twix 560, narrowing the gap by 3.4. Koki by 90, Amy, and F3RNY are locked in a battle for 12p. Koki by 90 and Amy are in a Radical SR319, while F3RNY is in a Spaniard GTA Spano. Twix 560 is closing the gap by 5.4 on Unipaki and Sir Ironbot. VD39 is also gaining ground, decreasing the distance by 5.7 on Okyoki 3. Additionally, Blotrin is significantly closing in on Susanne Greenberg, reducing the gap by 28.6. Gary_710 is making a significant push, closing the gap on Eugene 7 by 577.6 units. Hot Wheels Skid 01 is also gaining ground on Luke Runs, reducing the gap by 2.6. Twix 560 is successfully closing in on Unipaki and Sir Ironbot, narrowing the gap by 4.4. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are closing in on Luke Runs, reducing the gap by 10.0. Jump 073 is also making moves, narrowing the gap to Bucksize Row by 9.2. Hot Wheel Skid 01 has surged to 1p, overtaking Newcambocken. Hey there one serious guy, welcome back to the racetrack. Good to have you back with us for some high-speed action. Luke is now in second place after overtaking Newcambocken. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are both gaining on Newcambocken, closing in by 3.3 seconds. Similarly, Jump 073 is catching up to Bucksize Row, reducing the gap by 2.2 seconds. Twix 560 from Team Bolt Bucket Motorsports is closing the gap by 7.2 and chasing down Unipaki and Sir Ironbot. Meanwhile, Electric Mary is narrowing the distance to Amaljit by 10.6. On another note, Noga 77 is closing in on F3RNY with a 41.6 reduction in the gap. RR Raphael is making a strong move on Blurtrin, reducing the gap by 5.7. Meanwhile, Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are closing in on Newcambocken, narrowing the gap by 3.4. Also, Amaljit has jumped to 11p, overtaking Blakefish 88. Welcome back, Jays 1622. Great to have you back in the race car spectating squad. Strap in and let's enjoy the action together. Suzanne Greenberg is making a move on Zago 22, closing the gap by 496.9. Blurtrin is also closing in on Suzanne Greenberg, narrowing the gap by 12.3. Twix 560 from Team Bolt Bucket Motorsports is reeling in Unipaki and Sir Ironbot, reducing the gap by 3.0. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are gaining on Twix 560, reducing the gap by 22.9. Okioki 3 is closing in on Noga 77, reducing the gap by 5.5. Super Lacroix is making a significant move on F3RNY, closing the gap by 439.0. Suzanne E. Greenberg has made a significant gain, reducing the gap to F3RNY by 33.6. Keep an eye on this thrilling development. Suzanne E. Greenberg is closing in on F3RNY by 6.5. Amaljit is catching up to Koki by 90 and Amy, reducing the gap by 2.5. MD 162 is narrowing the distance to Electric Mary by 2.1. Twix 560 is on the move, closing in on Newcambocken by 5.1. It's a fierce battle for the top spot between Luke Runs in a Cadillac ATSV.R and Newcambocken in a Lancia LC2. Keep an eye on this intense race. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are gaining on Twix 560, narrowing the gap by 2.8. Hot Wheel Skid 01 is closing in on Bucksize Row, reducing the gap by 2.3. Arya Serial has advanced to 7p, overtaking Koki by 90 and Amy. Noka 77 is now just 574.0 behind MD 162. Meanwhile, Twix 560 is closing in on Newcambocken by 3.6, and Bucksize Row is reeling in Unipaki and Sir Ironbot, cutting the gap by 3.1. Electric Mary from Quark Express is narrowing the gap to Blakefish 88 by 5.9. MD 162 is closing in on Jump 073, reducing the gap by 20.3. 10K Manine 704 is making a move on F3RNY, closing the gap by 357.0. Amaljet is cutting down the gap to Coca by 90 and Amy by 7.8. VD39 is closing in on Moga 77 by 9.3. Super Lacroix is narrowing the distance to Todd R. Gardner by 567.1. Twix 560, Unipaki, and Sir Ironbot are in a fierce battle for the third position, with Bucks Row and Hot Wheel Skid 01 also fighting hard for the fifth spot. Meanwhile, Coca by 90 and I have advanced to the 7th position after overtaking Aria Serial. Duff Dad is making a strong push, reducing the gap to F3RNY by 276.4 units. Nukembakum from Team Death Robots has surged to 1P, overtaking Luke Runs. It's now a heated battle for the lead between Nukembakum in a Lancia LC2 and Luke Runs in a Cadillac ATSV.R. Suzanne Greenberg is making a strong move, closing the gap on Super Lacroix by 569.1. Nukembakum has jumped into 1P, passing Luke Runs. Meanwhile, RU Serial has climbed to 6P, overtaking Amaljet. Bucks Row is narrowing the gap to Coca by 90 and Amy by 5.4. Electric Mary is closing in on Bucks Row, reducing the gap by 9.5. Celery Samuel is also closing in on Bertrand, decreasing the gap by 5.1. Hey, looks like Zago 22 is having some pit trouble. And Aria Serial, it's all about skill and strategy. No surprise to see a Daytona driver making moves. Moga 77 is making a strong push, closing in on Coca by 90 and Amy by 540.7 units. Suzanne Greenberg is also gaining ground on Super Lacroix, narrowing the gap by 10.2. Additionally, Luke Runs is closing in on Nukembakum, reducing the gap by 4.7 units. Twix 560 is making a move on Luke Runs, reducing the gap by 5.6. Gary 710 is catching up to Hugged 03, cutting the gap by 6.5. MYST 149 is gaining on 10K Manine 704, closing in by 5.2. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are catching up to Hot Wheel Skid 01, reducing the gap by 6.4. Moga 77 is rapidly closing in on Amaljet, narrowing the gap by 41.2. VD39 is swiftly reeling in Moga 77, closing the gap by 6.3. Amaljet making moves, up to 9P after overtaking 4 cars. Luke Runs narrowing the gap, closing in on Nukembakum by 2.0. Hot Wheel Skid 01 on the move, closing in on Twix 560 by 3.0. Hugged 03 is closing in on MD 162, reducing the gap by 525.4. 10K Manine 704 is also catching up to Bertrand, closing the gap by 571.6. Meanwhile, Luke Runs has overtaken Nukembakum and moved up to 1P. Hot Wheel Skid 01 is making a strong move, cutting the gap to Nukembakum by 14.0. Hugged 03 is also closing in on Gary 710, narrowing the distance by 74.3. Twix 560 has surged to 2nd place, passing Nukembakum for position 2. Nukembakum is closing the gap on Twix 560 by 6.3. Meanwhile, 10K Manine 704 is cutting it close to Celery Samuel, trailing by just 44.7. There goes Newcombe again, closing in on Twix 560 by 6.3. Amalgit is really closing in on Electric Mary, reducing the gap by 16.0. Meanwhile, Gary 710 is making a strong move towards Okioki 3, closing the gap by 30.9. And over in another tight battle, Hot Wheels Skid 01 is narrowing the gap to Newcombe by 2.9. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are closing in on Hot Wheels Skid 01, narrowing the gap by 6.2. Todd Gardner from Team Melon Mates Motorsports is closing in on Ace 7, reducing the gap by 578.5. Super Lacroix from Team Death Robots is closing in on MD 162, reducing the gap by 428.2. John 073 is making a swift move, narrowing the gap to Twix 560 by 552.2. Meanwhile, Kokubai 90 and Amy are closing in on Jump 073, reducing the gap by 5.2. Additionally, Blotrin is gaining ground on R. Raphael, closing the gap by 567.0. Jump 073 continues to make impressive gains on Twix 560, reducing the gap by 38.4 units. Meanwhile, Newcombe is gaining ground on Luke Runs, narrowing the gap by 2.6 units. And once again, Jump 073 is closing in on Twix 560, reducing the gap by 38.4 units. Todd Gardner is rapidly gaining on Hoped 03, cutting the gap by 8.2. Jump 073 is closing in on Twix 560, decreasing the gap by 3.1. Blakefish 88 has advanced to 10p, surpassing Arya Serial. Blotrin is closing the gap on Celeris Emerald by 598.8. Twix 560 is reeling in Unipaki and Sir Ironbot, closing the gap by 4.9. Electric Mary is catching up to Kokubai 90 and Amy, closing the gap by 2.4. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are rapidly catching up to Hot Wheels Skid 01, reducing the gap by 5.3. Electric Mary from Team Quark Express is closing in on Kokubai 90 and Amy, narrowing the gap by 3.7. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot have made a significant gain, reducing the gap to Hot Wheels Skid 01 by 5.4. Meanwhile, Electric Mary from Team Quark Express is closing in on Kokubai 90 and Amy, narrowing the distance by 4.3. Newcombe is on a charge, closing in on Luke Runs by a significant 578.9 units. Meanwhile, VD39 has made a move up to 12th place, overtaking Milka 77. Okioki 3 is making a strong move, closing in on Milka 77 by 40.4. Additionally, Okioki 3 from Team COD and Gary 710 are locked in a battle for 14p. Exciting developments in this race. Jump 073 is making a swift move, cutting down the gap to Twix 560 by 7.0. Blakefish 88 is also gaining ground, reducing the distance to Amalgit by 6.0. Jump 073 is really closing in on Twix 560 from Team Bolt Bucket Motorsports, narrowing the gap by 7.0. Jump 073 is closing in on Twix 560, reducing the gap by 6.7. Kokubai 90 and Amy are quickly reeling in Jump 073, closing the gap by 579.5. VD39 is quickly reeling in Aria Serial, closing the gap by 6.3. Newcombe is quickly closing in on Luke Runs, reducing the gap by 6.2 seconds. Newcombe is reeling in Luke Runs, closing the gap by 6.2 seconds. Hot Wheels Skid 01 is gaining on Newcombe from Team Death Robots, reducing the gap by 4.7 seconds. Twix 560 is closing in on Unipaki and Sir Ironbot, reducing the gap by 4.3 units. Electric Mary is making gains on Kokobai 90 and Amy, narrowing the gap by 3.5. Meanwhile, Amaljet is closing in on Electric Mary, decreasing the gap by 2.1. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are gaining on Hot Wheels Skid 01, reducing the gap by 5.1. Twix 560 from Team Bolt Bucket Motorsports is catching up to Unipaki and Sir Ironbot, closing the gap by 5.2. RR Raphael is closing in on LV1NNY, reducing the gap by 6.3. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are making gains on Hot Wheels Skid 01, closing the gap by 7.9. Electric Mary from Team Quark Express is catching up to Kokobai 90 and Amy, closing the gap by 5.9. MYST149 is closing in on Blurtron, reducing the gap by 6.0. John 073 is making a strong move, closing in on Twix 560 by 6.7 units. VD39 is also gaining ground on Aria Serial, now just 6 units behind. Meanwhile, 10K 704 is catching up to Super Lacroix, reducing the gap significantly by 572.3 units. Hey there, Siren VR. Welcome back to the stream. It's great to have you here again. We've got some exciting races lined up today, so get ready for some high-speed action. Twix 560 is closing in on Unipaki and Sir Ironbot, reducing the gap by 5.2 seconds. Blakefish 88 is making gains on Electric Mary, narrowing the gap by 6.5 seconds. VD39 is rapidly closing in on Aria Serial, reducing the gap by 8.2 seconds. Newcombe is gaining on Luke Runs, reducing the gap by 574.4. Hot Wheels Skid 01 is also closing in on Newcombe, reducing the gap by 575.3. Amaljet is making headway on Blakefish 88, cutting the gap by 8.5. Newcombe from Team Death Robots is steadily closing in on Luke Runs, reducing the gap by 575.9. Electric Mary is gaining ground on Kokobai 90 and Amy, closing the gap by 11.1. Todd R. Gardner is making up distance on his Gene 7, closing the gap by 7.0. Hot Wheels Skid 01 is making a significant move, closing the gap on Newcombe by 573.2 units. Gary_710 is also gaining ground on VD39, reducing the gap by 572.8. Meanwhile, RR Raphael is steadily closing in on Blurtron, narrowing the gap by 5.3. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are closing in on Hot Wheels Skid 01, reducing the gap by 6.1. Electric Mary is quickly catching up to Kokobai 90 and Amy, narrowing the gap by 5.7. MYST149 is swiftly reeling in Super Lacroix, reducing the gap by 528.0. MYST149 is swiftly closing in on Super Lacroix, reducing the gap by 53.9. Koki by 90 and Amy are also catching up to Jump 073, narrowing the gap by 2.7. Meanwhile, Blakefish 88 is reeling in Electric Mary, decreasing the gap by 4.5. Newcambocken is now just 7.5 seconds behind Luke Runs. Jump 073 is closing in on Twix 560, reducing the gap to 6.8 seconds. VD39 is narrowing the gap to Aria Serial by 6.0 seconds. Jump 073 is catching up to Twix 560, closing the gap by 6.3 seconds. 10K Manine 704 is also making gains on Susanne Greenberg, reducing the gap by 6.7 seconds. However, Dovdad seems to have some work cut out as he's closing in on LV1NNY by 493.1 seconds. Twix 560 is making a strong move, closing the gap on Unipaki and Surayanbot by 5.6. Meanwhile, Celerasemul is closing in on Blutron, now just 8.8 behind. Keep an eye on Twix 560 as they make their move. Gary 710 is making a strong move, closing in on VD39 by 569.0 units. Meanwhile, Celerasemul is gaining ground on Blutron, reducing the gap by 6.0 units. Excitingly, Unipaki and Surayanbot have surged to 3P, overtaking Hot Wheel Skid 01. Amaljit is surging, closing in on Electric Mary with a 4.9 second gain. Meanwhile, RU Serial is making moves, closing the gap to Amaljit by 3.0. Noga 77 has climbed to 14th place, overtaking Okyoki 3. Unipaki and Surayanbot are closing in on Newcambocken, reducing the gap by 557.0. Twix 560 is also reeling in Hot Wheel Skid 01 from Team Wine and Midnight Runners, closing the gap by 11.8. Meanwhile, Celerasemul is quickly reeling in RR Raphael, reducing the gap by 13.3. Newcambocken is making moves, closing the gap by 10.5 to Luke Runs. Unipaki and Surayanbot are hot on Newcambocken's tail, closing the gap by 20.0. Meanwhile, Koki by 90 and I are gaining ground on Jump 073, reducing the gap by 15.4. Toddar Gardner is making a rapid approach on VD39, reducing the gap by 469.8 units. Unipaki and Surayanbot are also catching up to Newcambocken from Team Death Robots, closing the gap by 2.9. Additionally, Hogged 03 has surged to 16P, overtaking VD39. ESGN 7 is making a strong move, closing the gap on VD39 by 439.6. Meanwhile, MYST149 is catching up to 10K Manine 704, narrowing the gap by 10.0. Also, Newcambocken of Team Death Robots is gaining on Luke Runs, reducing the gap by 4.3. Newcambocken is getting caught up by Unipaki and Surayanbot as they reduce the gap by 580.1. Meanwhile, Newcambocken is also closing in on Luke Runs, cutting the gap by 3.5. It's a tight race with lots of movement. Twix 560 is closing in on Hot Wheel Skid 01, reducing the gap by 7.2. Susanne Greenberg is closing in on VD39, reducing the gap by 383.2. 10K Manine 704 is closing in on Susanne Greenberg, reducing the gap by 571.2. Luke is making a strong move, closing in on Newcambocken by 8.3. Twix 560 is also gaining ground on Hot Wheels Kit 01, reducing the gap by 9.1. Additionally, Electric Mary is closing in on Blakefish 88, narrowing the gap by 5.1. As Hot Wheels Kit 01 approaches Unipocky and Sir Iron Bot, the gap narrows by 8.0 units. Meanwhile, Koki by 90 and Amy are catching up to Jump 073, closing the gap by 5.8 units. Hot Wheels Kit 01 continues to reel in Unipocky and Sir Iron Bot, shrinking the gap by 8.0 units. Duff Dad is making significant progress, closing in on Blurtron by 525.1 units. Unipocky and Sir Iron Bot are also gaining on Luke Runs, closing the gap by 3.3. Additionally, Hot Wheels Kit 01 is closing in on Unipocky and Sir Iron Bot, reducing the gap by 4.7. John 073 is making a strong push, closing the gap on Twix 560 by 7.4 units. Unipocky and Sir Iron Bot are also gaining ground, reducing the distance to Luke Runs by 3.6. It's a showdown of skill and strategy on the track. ESGN7 is making a strong move, closing in on Todd R. Gardner by 572.8. Blakefish 88 is gaining ground on Koki by 90 and Amy, reducing the gap by 2.6. Meanwhile, Arya Serial is narrowing the distance to Amaljit by 2.7. Twix 560 is gaining on Hot Wheels Kit 01, now just 6.1 seconds behind. 10K Manine 704 is closing in on Susanne Greenberg, narrowing the gap to 6.5 seconds. Luke Runs is reeling in Newcambocken, now just 4.1 seconds behind. Blakefish 88 is closing in on Koki by 90 and Amy, reducing the gap by 575.1. 10K Manine 704 is closing in on Susanne Greenberg, reducing the gap by 6.2. Duff Dad is closing in on VD39, reducing the gap by 202.2. Koki by 90 and Amy are making significant progress, closing the gap to Jump 073 by 5.8 seconds. Meanwhile, Hot Wheels Kit 01 is catching up to Unipocky and Sir Iron Bot, reducing the gap by 4.4 seconds. Keep an eye on these exciting developments. John 073 is reeling in Twix 560, closing the gap by 2.1. Amaljit is reeling in Blakefish 88, closing the gap by 4.7. Okyoki 3 is reeling in Noga 77, closing the gap by 2.9. Twix 560 makes a strong move to take 4P from John 073. In response, John 073 swiftly overtakes Hot Wheels Kit 01 to secure 5P. Koki by 90 and Amy are quickly reeling in Hot Wheels Kit 01, closing the gap by 29.7. ESGN7 is quickly reeling in Todd R. Gardner, closing the gap by 572.6. John 073 is reeling in Twix 560, closing the gap by 3.3. Luke Runs is steadily closing in on Newcambocken, reducing the gap by 7.8. Meanwhile, Blakefish88 is making a rapid move to catch up with Hot Wheels Skid 01, narrowing the gap by 522.9. And again, Luke Runs is continuing to reel in Newcombotham, closing the gap by 7.8. Luke Runs is gaining on Newcombotham, closing the gap by 5.6 seconds. Additionally, Blakefish88 has made a strong move up to 7p, overtaking Amaljet. Aria Serial has climbed to 9th place after overtaking Hot Wheels Skid 01. Electric Mary has surged into 10th place, leaving Hot Wheels Skid 01 behind. Aria Serial has decreased the gap to Amaljet by 2.3, while Aria Raphael is closing in on Susanne Greenberg by 2.9. Milgo77 has made significant progress, closing the gap on Hot Wheels Skid 01 by 440.6. Meanwhile, Aria Raphael is steadily gaining on Susanne Greenberg, reducing the gap by 2.2. Hot Wheels Skid 01 is making a serious move, closing in on Electric Mary from Team Quark Express by a massive 470.3. Meanwhile, Gary 710 has overtaken Hugged 03 and climbed to 14p. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are making gains, closing in on Luke Runs by 4.4. Okyoki 3 has advanced to 12p, overtaking Hot Wheels Skid 01. Celerasamu is narrowing the gap on Aria Raphael by 2.5. Aria Raphael is gaining on Susanne Greenberg, closing the gap by 5.2. Newcombotham and Luke Runs are battling for 1p in a Lancia LC2 and Cadillac ATSV. Respectively. Meanwhile, Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are closing in on Luke Runs, reducing the gap by 4.5. Todd R. Gardner is closing in on Hot Wheels Skid 01 by 351.0. Luke Runs has overtaken Newcombotham and now leads the race. Aria Serial is closing in on Amaljet by 2.6. Jump 073 is making a strong move, closing the gap on Twix 560 by 5.7. Gary 710 is also gaining ground on Okyoki 3, narrowing the gap by 5.0. Jump 073 is continuing to close in on Twix 560, reducing the gap by 5.7. Kokubai 90 and Amy has significantly closed the gap with Jump 073 by 577.8 units. Gary _710 is also closing in on Okyoki 3 by 5.9 units. Additionally, Jump 073 is reeling in Twix 560, reducing the gap by 3.8 units. Celerasamu is closing in on Susanne Greenberg, reducing the gap by 6.3. Super Lacroix is also making gains, closing in on Isjian 7 by 449.5. It's a thrilling battle for first place between Luke Runs in a Cadillac ATSV.R and Newcombotham in a Lancia LC2. Todd R. Gardner is now just behind Hugged 03, closing the gap by 569.3. Aria Raphael is closing in on Hot Wheels Skid 01, narrowing the gap by 292.4. Celerasamu is catching up to Susanne Greenberg, reducing the gap by 5.7. Blakefish88 is closing in on Kokubai 90 and Amy, reducing the gap by 575.1 meters. Electric Mary is narrowing the gap to Aria Serial by 6.0 meters. Susanne Greenberg is quickly gaining on Celerisamo, closing the gap by 9.2 meters. Dovdad is rapidly catching up to ESG 7, reducing the gap by 355.0. Newcambochum has surged to 1p, surpassing Luke Runs. Meanwhile, Amaljet has advanced to 7p, overtaking Blakefish 88. MYST 149 is closing in on Hot Wheels Skid 01 by 209.3 units. Koki by 90 and Amy are catching up to Jump 073, reducing the gap by 2.3 units. Okyoki 3 has advanced to 12p, overtaking Gary 710. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are closing in on Luke Runs, reducing the gap by 2.6. Blakefish 88 is reeling in Amaljet, closing the gap by 3.2. Gary 710 has moved up to 12p, overtaking Okyoki 3. Koki by 90 and Amy continue to push forward, reducing the gap to Jump 073 by 3.0. Celerisamo has closed the gap on R.A. Raphael by 4.6. Gary_710 has made a significant move, reducing the gap to Mogus 77 by 2.1 seconds. Amaljet is really making moves, closing in on Koki by 90 and Amy with a significant 576.5 reduction in the gap. Twix 560 is also gaining ground, closing in on Unipaki and Sir Ironbot with a 4.1 reduction in the gap. And once again, Amaljet is showing impressive pace, reeling in Koki by 90 and Amy by 576.5. Twix 560 is making significant gains, closing the gap to Unipaki and Sir Ironbot by 26.9 units. Meanwhile, Dovdad is swiftly catching up to Hot Wheels Skid 01, narrowing the distance by 94.6 units. The race dynamics are really heating up. MYST 149 is now only 538.1 units behind Susanne Greenberg. Blakefish 88 has closed the gap to Amaljet by 2.9. Electric Mary is closing in on Aria Serial, reducing the gap by 3.1. The battle for position is heating up as Jump 073 is making significant gains, closing the gap by 578.2. Similarly, MYST 149 is also pushing hard, reducing the distance to Susanne Greenberg by 10.2. Looks like Jump 073 is really putting on a show, closing in on Twix 560 by 578.2. Celerisamo is catching up to R.A. Raphael, reducing the gap by 5.2 seconds. Super Lacroix is closing in on Susanne Greenberg, with a gap reduction of 517.3. Twix 560 is closing the gap on Unipaki and Sir Ironbot by 3.0 seconds. Jump 073 is closing the gap on Unipaki and Sir Ironbot by 572.1 units. Amaljet is closing in on Koki by 90 and Amy by 576.2 units. R.A. Raphael is closing in on Todd R. Gardner by 543.3 units. R.A. Raphael from Team Blast is making an impressive move, closing the gap to Todd R. Gardner by 14.6. Exciting developments on the track. Duff Dad is making some moves, closing in on Susanne Greenberg by 5.8. Twix 560 and Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are currently battling it out for the third spot. It's getting intense out there. Luke is making a move, narrowing the gap to Nikembakken by 4.6. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are now in third place after overtaking Twix 560. Meanwhile, Duff Dad has advanced to 22nd position, passing Susanne Greenberg. Amaljit is rapidly closing the gap by 600.0, aiming for a strong position. Meanwhile, Luke Runs is steadily catching up to Nikembakken, reducing the gap by 2.5. Exciting developments as the race heats up. Koki by 90 and Amy are making a strong push, closing the gap to Jump 073 by 7.1. Luke Runs is gaining on Nikembakken, reducing the gap by 2.9. An intense battle is underway for 3P between Unipaki, Sir Ironbot, and Twix 560. Koki by 90 and Amy has moved up to 5P, overtaking Jump 073. Electric Mary is reeling in Aria Serial, closing the gap by 2.3. Kano has moved up to 38P, overtaking Cryptic Kaiser. Jump 073 is making moves, closing the gap by 4.3 seconds on Koki by 90 and Amy. Meanwhile, R.R. Raphael is climbing up, now in 17P after overtaking Todd R. Gardner. F3RNY is making moves, now up to 30P after overtaking MD 162. MD 162 is closing in on Buck's Row with a significant gain of 1,438.8. Meanwhile, Jump 073 is making a move, reducing the gap to Koki by 90 and Amy by 2.6. Additionally, F3RNY has overtaken Buck's Row, securing the 29th position. Twix 560 is making a move, closing in on Unipaki and Sir Ironbot by 8.3. Gary 710 is hot on the heels of Electric Mary, closing the gap by 553.1. 10K Manine 704 is closing the gap on Hugged 03 by 554.4. Nikembakken is taking the lead, followed closely by Luke Runs and Unipaki, while Sir Ironbot is holding strong in third place. The battle is getting heated as Unipaki and Sir Ironbot close in on Luke Runs, reducing the gap by 552.5. Meanwhile, R.R. Raphael is also making moves, narrowing the gap to Hugged 03 by 510.8. Exciting developments on the track. Har, looks like we've got some AI love going on in the chat. Keep it fun and light-hearted, everybody. Unipaki and Sir Ironbot are rapidly catching up to Luke Runs, reducing the gap by 40.3. Koki by 90 and Amy are swiftly closing in on Jump 073, narrowing the gap by 568.5. Arya Serial is swiftly reeling in Blakefish 88, reducing the gap by 562.8.